Street gospel, light of the temple. Sword swing, killer live from the ghetto. The hood messenger, let them know hell's close. Black burial, the devil in a black cloak.
Yo, what is up? Welcome to the Street Gospel Podcast. I'm your host, Dave One. And this is episode number... Yo, Cam, what episode is this, man?
Episode 91.
You were slow on that one right there.
Yeah.
Episode 91, man. Episode 91. So if you caught our last episode, it was with the UFC fighter, 155er, Jalen the Tarantula Turner, man. Definitely a good story, man. He broke down what happened to him at UFC 300, family stuff. He broke down how he came to the Lord. So shout out to Jalen Turner, man, the Tarantula, for coming down. If you haven't checked out that one, make sure you go check it out. And if you don't like fighting, you don't like the UFC, maybe you're not into that, maybe you know somebody, send it to them, man. Let them check it out. Definitely a good story. Really cool dude, man. Really chill, young dude. He's going to be champion one day. I put it out there right now. He's going to be champ. So make sure you check that out. But anyways, I need everybody out there to please subscribe. If you're watching us, listening to us on Spotify, hit that subscribe button. And on YouTube, we're trying to get our YouTube numbers up. So if you can, make sure you go subscribe to the YouTube channel. It'll be great. Street Gospel Podcast or Street Gospel TV. Either one, you'll find us. We're the only one out there with the Street Gospel. Make sure you check it out. Make sure you subscribe. But today, I got a guest, man. And I've been... keeping my eye on him for a minute, trying to get him out here, you know, and I'll put on a little music real quick. You know, this guy, he is a longtime believer. He's a husband, a father, a grandfather. It seems like every time I see him on the gram, he's at another kid's birthday party, man. It's crazy. Like every week, I'm like, this guy's going broke off presents for his kids and his grandkids. But he's a really good dude, a believer, father, husband. He is a pastor of Resiliency Church in the South Bay there. He's been there for a while. Great church. We've had some fruit from this podcast go to his church, which is crazy, and we'll talk about that. But I want to welcome to the Street Gospel Podcast. Oh, wait a minute. And he's a fellow Raider fan. So you know it's going to be good. You know, I never met a Raider fan I didn't like, and he's definitely proof of that. But I want to welcome to the Street Gospel Podcast, Pastor Mando Luna.
Yes, good to be here. Thank you, David, man. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too, man.
You know, when it's great to be here. You know, I've been watching your podcast for a while, seeing all the guests that you've had on, and so to be here this morning, man, it's a real privilege, man. So,
yeah, we appreciate you coming out, man, making the trek. Okay, so I know you're in the South Bay, but I know you recently moved buildings, right?
Correct. So we had been in a hotel for the past 5 years.
Okay.
2018, we launched Resiliency Church. And so we were there. Hotel gave us great favor, man. We had, we're using all the conference rooms, and we just outgrew it. And so last year or so, we've been praying for, actually going to go to 2 services, but just prayed that God opened a door for us. And then 4 weeks ago, we got our building.
Nice, man.
Incredible opportunity. The location, directly in the center of Torrance,
wow,
where we feel God's called us. And it's just been an incredible thing God's been doing. Seeing a great move of God, filling up, just power of God moving, man.
So good, man. I trip out on that because being a mobile church is rough.
It's rough, man.
Right?
It's rough.
Cam's in a mobile church right now. He's
Yeah.
been he's just like it's tough to really set up everything all the time, right?
It is. The good thing when we're at the hotel, one of the things that really that helped us was that the hotel gave us a lot of leadway. We didn't always have to tear down the backdrops and all the lights, and so they gave us a lot of favor, man. So we got to leave a lot of that stuff up, but we just outgrew it. We needed more room. More people were coming. People were sitting in the lobby area. We'd have to keep the doors open, and people would sit in the lobby area just to watch the service.
Wow!
So we can't do this anymore, man. We need something. And God opened the door, man. So, but I know the struggle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's dope, man. It's great, man. How long have you been pastoring?
Well, if you include youth pastoring, associate pastoring, and then of course lead pastor. Probably around 20 years. Around
20 years. How long have you been pastoring the church?
Resonate. 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah, we've had a lot of transition. We started in 2007, and then we transitioned a lot from went from Torrance to Redondo to Gardena, and then back to Torrance. And it was in 2015 we did a church merger. I think we talked about this. I think you and Jason, I think it was after a men's meeting we had.
I think so, yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
And so we did a church merger in 2015, and everything at first looked great, man. Like, okay, this is going to work, man. It was a big building. We brought in our congregation. The other congregation was accepting, and the whole thing was that the other pastor was going to transition to another role. But once we got in there, and the first year and a half went well, but the last couple years was really rough because I think the visions of my vision and his vision were just different.
Yeah.
And so it didn't work out, man. So we relaunched in 2018 Resonate. But it was tough, man, because in 2018, we had came out of that merger. And if you've ever been in a church merger where it didn't work or a split, there was a lot of hurt, a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration. And so I remember ending that Friday with the other church. And literally that next Sunday, we're having service again, a new building, right, the hotel. And didn't really have time to really grieve that and mourn that. And so for the first probably 6 months, we were like the nameless church. We were just like, let's just meet. Let's not try to put anything together, not try to strategize or appoint leaders, or let's just come together and let's see what God does.
Right.
And it gave me a little time. It took me about 3 or 4 months to kind of untwist and unwind all that stuff I had been through. And then 6 months later, that's when we officially launched Resonate. And we've just seen God do incredible things.
How did you get the name Resonate?
It's just been on my heart for years. Actually, in 2011, I thought about changing. We were at Praise Chapel, Torrance. I thought in 2011 of changing our name to Resonate. And it's been in my heart. I even think I had Bryn or Orange County work on some graphics for me back then.
Wow.
I presented to our leaders at that time, but they were like, well, let's just kind of wait and see. So I put it on the back burner and then just totally forgot about it. So then when we were in that 6-month mark after being in the hotel, it came back. And I'm like, God wanted to do this.
Yeah.
And so that's when we did it. We launched it, Resonate Church, man.
Man, you should have did it, bro.
I know.
You could have been first to change your name, but it seemed like you were a follower, but you could have been a trendsetter. You know what I mean?
I know.
Everybody else changed their name, then you changed your name.
I got you, man. I was kind of forced into it at that point, man. I had no choice, man. We were the nameless church, and I'm like, okay, we got to figure out a name here, man. So, but yeah,
Nomad Chapel.
We're the Nomad Chapel, man, for a while, and I think that it was good for this reason. I think it really.
Pull your mic a little bit closer. Just a hair.
Closer to me?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. It allowed the congregation to really bond in a way like our identity is not going to be in the name, but in the people. Like we're gonna be the church, and then from here we'll launch the name. I think it just worked out perfectly.
Yeah, I think you could have been a trendsetter right there, man. But it's all good.
Missed that opportunity.
Present. You know what? My wife asked me today. She was I was telling her the other day that you were coming, and today she goes, "Hey, where did he grow up at?" And I was like, I've known him for like, how long have I known him? Like 25 years?
Since Praise Chapel, man.
Right.
Since,
like old school Paramount days.
I remember you came to Paramount with
my Uncle Woody.
Yeah, but I remember you were in a breakdancing group or something, weren't you?
I was a little rapper, you know?
I remember you come to Paramount rapping and dancing. I'm like, who's this guy, man?
I know,
but you did good, man. You did good. But I remember that. So let's go back. That's 90.
Really?
So 34 years, man. Maybe.
And did you grow up in the Paramount area? Where did you grow up?
No, I was born and raised in Compton, California.
Compton,
man.
the
Yes.
CPT. See, I never even knew that.
Rancho Dominguez Hospital, Compton. My grandparents lived off of Rose Street, off of Rosecrans and Alameda.
Okay.
So I was born in Compton, lived there. My mom and dad we lived with my grandparents. And then my mom and dad divorced when I was 3 or 4. And then we moved. My mom and myself moved to Long Beach. And so basically grew up in Long Beach. But I was always in Compton because my grandparents, man, I had such a great relationship with them.
CPT and the LBC.
And the LBC, man. So, so I grew up there. Went to then I started going to Paramount High, and I went to the schools right there in that community. But yeah, from Long Beach and Compton, man. So that's where I'm from.
It's so crazy because I think sometimes I was with Pastor Adam, a good friend of yours, right?
Yeah.
And my pastor.
Yeah,
And
love that guy.
we had like a 2.5 hour drive the other day, and we were together for about a week, so we were telling stories. But this drive, I was telling him a little bit more about my life, and I realized like I've known Pastor Adam for probably 30 years, and we've been acquaintances, we've been friends, and now he's my pastor, and I think we're good friends now, And but I trip out on I was like, it kind of sucks sometimes because in the church realm, like we've been friends. If I see you, I know your family, I know. My wife reminded me that your father-in-law used to go to their church, all this stuff, right? And we're all like connected, but somehow we're like connected but not close. And it almost sometimes seems like a working relationship, right? You work with guys for 25 years at the job, and you're like, hey, but you never had dinner with them.
Right.
I think sometimes I was like, man, I gotta break that sometimes and really like say, hey, man, tell me a little something about yourself.
Right.
I think that's what I think this podcast and trying to set it up, it kind of like was like hitting me like, yeah, I want to know a little bit more about Pastor Mando.
Yeah.
And I think what makes it worse is like the social media. We think we know everything about somebody's life.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. If anything, social media, I think has worked total opposite of what I think people think it should have worked. I think it's distanced people more than anything else, man. I think you're right. We look on social media, and first of all, social media is an illusion, man. I mean, you just see the highlights of somebody's life, but you don't really get to know them, right? And so because you see it, you think, well, I know them, and you really don't. And so back in the day when we had no social media, you remember those days, man, to get to know someone, you had to spend time with them. Yeah. And I think that's still relevant today. I think that getting to know people, you got to spend time with them, man. Yeah. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Because we've been in the same realm. I know we're close to my Uncle Woody.
Oh man,
that was your guy.
Yeah,
and a lot of traits that he had, I see in you. It's crazy, man.
Man, he made an impact. Him and Apples made an impact on our lives, man. I mean, when we got saved, he was the first one that like stepped into my life to take discipleship over me, man. I mean, I remember that first Thanksgiving. We actually spent it. We got saved. And I want to say it was June of 1990. So in November of 1990, we were spending Thanksgiving with Woody and Apples at their house, man, and Robert's house, and little Tony and Ronnie were little kids, babies, and we were there, man. I mean, they took us in and really imparted into us. So when he passed, man, I took that hard. It was hard for me. It was really hard for me.
Yeah, we had son Champ on.
Yeah,
that was one of the best podcasts we ever had, man. Just as far as meaning and how deep it went, it was good.
I bet, man.
Definitely good. So who were you before you got saved, man?
Oh man.
I mean, I anticipate that growing up in CPT LBC, it probably wasn't the easiest place to grow up. So how was that?
I never got in any gangs. It was never. I mean, a lot of family member in gangs, right? A lot of family and friends that were gang members. For me, I think what was harder than anything else was just not having my dad around. So my mom and dad divorced when I was 4 years old. I moved to Long Beach with my mom. My mom worked, long hours. So I was that latchkey kid, come home from school.
Only kid?
Only kid with my mom, and then my dad had a new family, and more. So I have half brothers and sisters, but that was difficult, man. I think so. I started to search out, with other friends, and then those friends do things you shouldn't be doing, and I got involved doing those things, and never got into drugs or gangs. But I was still a wild kid, man, and just a rebellious kid. And, but when it came to women and girls at that time, man, I was into the girls.
So that was your thing.
That was my thing, man. It was the girls, man. It was, 11, 12 years old and 13, met my girlfriend and, having sex at 13 years old, and that didn't have anybody to teach me that. I learned that pretty much on my own, right? And so I don't think for guys, man, it's that hard, right?
Not difficult.
No, it's not that difficult,
If
man.
dogs can figure it out, we
yeah,
can
exactly, man, exactly. It's like, guys, it's pretty simple, man. But yeah, so I think that was just not having that the family, husband, wife, traditional home. That was difficult for me.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the biggest things in our society right now.
Yeah.
Just a fatherless home, or not even
Yeah.
just a positive role model in your home. I think that's the hardest thing.
Difficult. And so what you do is you look for your role models. Again, we didn't have no internet, social media at that time, but you look for role models on TV, or you look for role models out in the streets, and you're trying to find somebody you can look up to say, I want to be like that, some type of pattern to follow.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't there for me. So you when you don't have it, you just start making your own patterns up. And I got into a lot of trouble when I was young.
It's crazy because I tell young guys that don't have that, because you get a lot of young guys that make it an excuse why I don't have a father,
Right.
Or even older men,
Right,
I didn't have a father. I didn't have that in my life. There was nobody, and I tell guys, especially in the church, like, hey man, if you could find somebody you admire, or find somebody you aspire to be like, or that you see something good in them and you say, man, I wish I can be like that, go up to them,
Yep.
ask them a million questions. Then I tell those men, like, hey man, you see those guys, try to like just be their friend, speak
Right,
into their
right.
life a little bit, and it makes all the difference, right?
Absolutely. That's why the church is so important. Talks about in the church that, look at your older men as fathers, older women as mothers, younger girls as sisters, and younger men as brothers. And I think that model of the family should be in the church to help kids and people that come in, so we can impart into them all the things that I learned to be a husband, to be a father, be a good leader, and all the things that I've learned as a man, I learned in the church. I got saved young, right? And so I guess we'll talk about that in a moment. But I learned all those things from people, men and women in the church, that helped set that example for me. And it changed my life. That's why the church is so important, how we model and set the example for other people that come in.
Yeah, I think that's huge, and it made an impact on generations.
Yep.
Here's a guy that started off no father, no role model,
Right.
But then I see your grandkids,
Oh,
and
man.
I'm like, man,
Oh man, I love my grandkids.
It's crazy,
man.
right?
I love my grandkids, man.
It was broken.
Yeah.
Within one generation, broken.
One of the things that I think a number of people deal with this is they see maybe their life has been difficult, and whether they, my family line, we deal with a lot of divorce. Whether it be my dad or my uncles or there's a lot of divorce in my family tree. And so you don't want to repeat that for your family. And that was one of the things that I didn't want. I didn't want, my kids to be without a dad in the home. So I fought hard to say, I want to make sure I make the changes I need to make to set my kids up for success in the future. And so by doing that mindset helped me, kind of catapulted me forward to say, I want to make sure my family works. And so it helped me. It helped me set the pattern for our home, some of the traditions that we have, family vacations and spending time together. And it just really set the pattern for my kids to follow after.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
So how did you finally get saved, man?
Oh, man. So, 13, 14, I was 13. My girlfriend was 14 when we met. She took advantage of me, man. So I wasn't bothered by it. I didn't fight it, but she just took advantage of me. And
for those older women,
yeah, those
bro,
older
you know
women,
what I
man.
mean?
Those older women. I just
Cam, look out, man.
Yeah. Be careful, Cam. But at 13, 14, we got together, and again, we were already having sex at that age. Going a year later, maybe a year and a half later, she gets pregnant. So at 15. I'm a dad already.
That's crazy.
So you got to keep this in mind, man. I don't know the Lord. I didn't have a dad in my life as a role model, or even to set the example of how to be a dad. Now at 15, I'm becoming a dad, and the anxiety and the fear and all the stuff that's coming through my head, like, man, how am I going to do this? My girlfriend's dad at that time was an evangelist for Praise Chapel. You remember Tony and Taco, right?
Yeah, Taco.
Yeah, and so he'd always be, witnessing to us, telling us, hey, you need to check out this church, because we were real close to the Praise Chapel Paramount. So you need to check that church out. I know the pastor there, Omar Lopez, and he's a great guy. And at the time, I wasn't even thinking about that, right? Because I grew up Catholic, so my whole thing.
So you didn't have nothing as far as church wise. You didn't know you didn't know nothing.
I didn't know nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
Catholic. I mean,
Yeah.
the religion,
Just going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one night we're driving again. I'm 15. She's 16. We have my daughter already, who's almost a year old. We're driving down Paramount Boulevard. We get to the stop sign at Somerset, and I just happen to glance over to the right, and I see that banner that says "Vision for the '90s." I don't remember that. Remember that old cheap banner,
Me
man?
and Pastor Adam were talking about that the other day. We said vision for the 90s.
Remember that?
And people still had it up, and it was 1999.
It was the same thing, man. I see that banner, that old burgundy with white lettering banner. It looked horrible, man. It looked like war torn, man.
That's funny.
And so I seen the banner, and then I remember what Tony had said. Say, hey, listen, there's that church is right there. And so I told Lisa at the time, I go, because we were fighting. It was one of those big fights, and we're arguing. And I go, maybe we should go check it out. So we made a turn, went in there, and we walked in. Now, keep in mind, I grew up Catholic, so I'm used to walking into a church with the holy water and the sign of the cross and 45-minute service. I walk in and people are lifting their hands, they're singing, they're dancing. I'm like, what did I just walk into here?
And we got 45-minute worship.
Yeah, 45 minutes. It's like 45 minutes time to go, man. They're still worshiping. What's happening here, man? And we sat in the back, and I remember at the altar, and Pastor Omar was preaching. I don't remember the message. But at the very end, I just knew I needed to respond.
Wow.
And so me and Lisa both walked up together, and we gave our lives to Christ that day, and then the rest is history, man. So I was 15. I'll take it back. I was 16. She was 17 when we got saved.
That's crazy,
Man.
It's funny because I used to think that you were older than me back then.
Thanks, man.
And, not in that way.
Yeah, I got you. I
was just like, this guy has a kid.
Yeah.
We're the same age, right? 50, right?
Yeah, 50, man. Yeah.
So are you still seeing visions or are you seeing dreams now?
I'm seeing both, bro.
Okay.
I'm actually hallucinating now, man. I'm kidding. A lot of people thought that because I had a kid already.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happened to me too when I had my daughter, I remember being in the room when she was born, and I almost passed out, man. I'm like, this is crazy, My family at the time wanted me to abort her. Like they were pushing my girlfriend to have the abortion. Her mom was actually the one, and I think my mom too was fighting for no, just have the baby. But my dad and others were like, get the abortion. And again, not a believer, so that's a contemplation. But even then, I knew that's wrong, man. Like that's not going to happen. I mean, no matter what, this is my child. We're going to have this baby. What the problems that come with it, the struggles that come with it, we're just going to have to endure it. I remember thinking this as a kid going, that's my child. I can't do that.
Wow.
And that day when Shatera was born, my daughter, all the family was at the hospital. And as soon as she was born, immediately, I mean, I'm in tears as a kid going, I know from this day going forward that I'm going to do everything I can to protect this child and be the best dad I can be. I mean, it just came over me, and I'm 16 years old. After that, it seemed like my family just kind of came together and rallied behind us.
Wow.
So it's like at first they fight it, and then once it's done, they rallied.
Yeah.
And that's just an encouragement for those out there that are having questions about their pregnancies or should I abort? No, just you got to move forward. And when it's done, there'll be those that come around to support you, and especially the church. The church should be there to support you.
Yeah, I think, man, it almost like it's weird. And it's for young people. Obviously, we don't want them to get pregnant in the first place. But when that happens, it's like, man, okay, you messed up.
Yeah.
But let's not make it worse by compounding that mistake, which most people would say it by making it worse. Like you can make that mistake, turn that mistake into something positive.
Absolutely.
By having that child and raising that child the right way. I think when people abort the kid, it just compounds that issue.
Agree.
You know what I mean? Maybe not financially or, career wise, or maybe if they're going to school, but in the mind and in the heart, that's something that sticks with you for a long time. Like what could have been.
So I always say this, that even though you made the mistake, God doesn't make mistakes.
Right.
And in my years pastoring, I can't tell you how many women have come to me for prayer over what they had done prior to getting saved over that particular issue of having an abortion. And even years later, man, they're still struggling with the guilt over that. And so it's a big issue, man. It's a big issue. And I know it's in our culture with the church and state and all the stuff that we've had to come up against. People don't understand the damage that it does to the soul and to the mind of that individual going for, not just to mention the physical part of it, but, you know, we believe that life begins at conception, right? And so it's a problem, man. So a lot of people today, like you said, want to take the easy route. And again, I'm not being insensitive to how it came to be, but when it's all said and done, that is a child, that's a life. And so, and I believe that even as the church responsibility, even if it was a mistake that happened or took place for this child to be born, the church's job is to come behind and now rally to help every way they can to make sure that that child does well.
Yeah, I think the church has been better about that.
I agree.
Maybe the last 10 years.
I agree.
I think before that, it was just like maybe a scarlet letter on that kid, especially church kids, man. That was,
I know.
You know what I mean? And it happens.
I know, man.
And I think sometimes it was just like, oh my God. And it is disappointing. You know what I mean? I mean, it is like, man, what the heck? But I think to compound that issue and not love on that kid or the mother or even that guy that, you know, messed up, I think that's the wrong thing to go. I mean, what are we going to do?
I agree. I think the church has done better. I do. I think, though, that where the times the church has or has failed at that is I think we just didn't know or had not encountered it enough, didn't do enough research or didn't really understand how to deal with it. But as time's gone on, we've had to learn how to adapt and realize, man, that our responsibility as a church is to approach people with truth and grace. Like Jesus did, right?
Yeah.
Came with grace and with truth. There is an element of when someone does fail or make a mistake that grace needs to be given, right? You who are spiritual, restore that one in a way, right? Watch yourself that you're not tempted, but you being the spiritual one have a responsibility to go in and try to help this individual the best you can. But in that same process, you got to give them truth, you know, and that's important. So that's what the world doesn't like today. They like the grace. They don't like the truth.
I know. Same with the alphabet mafia.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean?
It's right.
It's like,
we want the grace.
Yes.
But don't give me the truth.
Don't give me the truth. Just love me.
Exactly.
You're supposed to open your arms to me and accept me, but don't tell me no truth. And it's like, well, if I love you, then I got to tell you the truth. Exactly.
I was thinking the story, and I was talking about the story of the man that was lame at Bethsaida. And so Jesus comes, and he's walking through. He sees this man. He's been paralyzed there, lame for 38 years. He goes up to him. He tells him, "Hey, listen, do you want to be well?" I mean, you would think that's just of course he wants to be well. But he asks him, and he says, "Well, I can't get to the water. Every time the angel stirs the water, I can't get there." So Jesus tells him, "Well, pick up your mat and walk." So immediately he's healed. He gets up, takes his mat. And it was funny to me is that the religious leaders see that, right? You know the story. And they're like, "Hey, you can't be carrying your mat on this day. It's a Sabbath." This guy's been paralyzed for 38 years, man. You're worried about him carrying his mat on the Sabbath day? Really? So he looks, and this is something that I saw that I never saw before. And it's been there just when God brings revelation to you. He looked for Jesus, but the Bible says that Jesus disappeared in the crowd. Okay, so he's nowhere to be found. And later on, if you read a few verses down, the Bible says that Jesus found him, that guy, in the temple. And he told him, he says, "Hey, listen, stop sinning, lest something worse come upon you." And it hit me was that when he came to this man, he came in grace. Like, you want help? I'm here to help you. I'm here, the genuine love that I have for you, I am here to help you. And then once he was healed, once the grace was extended and he received the miracle, he didn't just leave and go, "Hey, give him a high five." Okay, man. He actually, came back around and gave him truth and said, "Stop sinning. Yeah. Don't sin. Don't." Now, again, we can get into all the theology about sinning and the sanctification process as a believer, but he made that a point to say, "Hey, listen, you have grace, but let me give you truth now." Yeah. And that's what the world, and that's what, like we're talking about, they don't want to hear that.
Right. I mean, that's crazy though.
Isn't that crazy?
I mean, yeah. I think, a lot of churches don't stand on truth. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, let's bestow the grace and it sounds good. Let's bring them in, but it's very difficult. Yeah. I think, you have to extend that. And I think in this day and age, people are afraid of getting canceled, or people are afraid of speaking the truth. People are afraid of offending somebody. And I'm like, man, if you grew up in the church in our day and age,
oh man, you wouldn't be able to handle it, man. Like,
it was wild.
we're militant. Like we're like Marines believers, man. Right? I mean,
Come here, let me cast
like,
it out.
If you didn't go to prayer meeting, man, you're a backslider. You're a sinner, man. You got to be at prayer meetings, no vacations. You can't take vacation. I mean, it was like militant style.
I know.
But as you look back, for me, it was almost like I needed that.
You know what? Somebody told me that one time. They said, you know what? That's what we needed. From where we came from, no discipline, nobody ever telling us what to do. We weren't committed to anything. I think at that point in time, we needed that to try to get into line. And I think that like the newer generations, 2 or 3 generations after that, maybe your kids,
right,
learn to balance that, you know,
Right.
balance the church and home and family and whatever else they got going on. But, you know, keeping God first, the foundation.
Yeah.
But in our days, it was like,
It was militant style, man.
we were at church like 6 days a week, bro.
So I remember the revivals. Remember those the week revivals, the
5-day
5-day
revivals.
revivals, man. And then you got all night prayer meetings, and then we have Sunday morning and Sunday night. And then choir practice at 4:30. I mean, like there was no time. My kids grew up, and you know this, sleeping on the floors of the church. But I do agree with there was an element that was needed, especially for someone like me who had no discipline, had no structure, and it just pushed me, and it also instilled in me a desire for the kingdom, and it instilled in me a value for the kingdom. Like, this is what's important in life.
Right.
And then as a culture changed, things begin to change, church cultures begin to change. Even though we change, I still remember the value of those times, and it stays with me today.
Yeah, I think it's, I look back on those times, and I don't think I would change it.
Me
right?
either.
I don't think I'll change it. I mean, we were Sunday morning church.
Yeah.
Then we leave straight to the Coliseum, watch a Raider game for $15,
Yeah,
$11,
yeah.
right?
Come back,
and then come back for
be defeated, and
not in those days.
yeah, not in those days, man. They were a little better back then.
Committed
man.
to excellence.
Yes,
in those
exactly,
days, right?
exactly.
Come back 6 p.m. church,
Yep,
right?
Yep.
We come in with our pom poms,
Yeah.
And then Monday was like discipleship class, new conference. Tuesday was like an outreach.
Yep.
Wednesday service. You might have Thursday off. Like Thursday
Maybe.
was the day, right?
Maybe.
Friday Bible study.
Yep.
Saturday morning prayer. Saturday night live, and then you did it all over
I remember
again.
Saturday Night Lives. I
Right?
remember that, man.
I mean, it was we were busy, but I think at that point in time, man, it was needed.
Absolutely.
I mean, that church kept me out of trouble.
Absolutely.
Being involved kept me out of trouble. Being in the church, learning things. And you know what the crazy thing is about being in church that much is like the things we learned. Like we learned about Christ. We learned about the Word. You know, but the other things that I trip out on, like where would we have learned to like hook up, you know, a soundboard.
Right.
Or run a projector.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or some organization, right? There was some
Yeah.
organization within the church. This is how we set up things. This is how we run things. This is how it goes. Like, I think all that, like, it helped. And you see a lot of younger, like Cam, like, he knows how to set up this whole thing. He runs the whole thing here.
Right.
And where did he learn all that from?
Church.
You know what I mean? Setting up at church, learning those things. I think there was a lot of skills that we learned that young people now have like actual jobs that they started off in the church serving.
That's so good. And I think that, you know, people ask me before, Pastor, how do I know the calling on my life? How do I know what I'm called to do? My recommendation is always start serving somewhere. Get involved in your church.
Right.
Find, you know, what was cool is that when we were young, got to remember we were young parents. I remember my pastor telling my wife, we had gotten married. I was 17. She was 18 when we got married. You know, hey, why don't you get involved in the kids ministry? Why don't you do something with the kids? And at first my wife was a little standoffish with that, but then she goes, okay, you know, I'll get involved. Well, when she got involved in the kids ministry, she loved it. I mean, she just fell in love with it, and it helped her in the decision of actually going to school, becoming a teacher, like all of that. But it started by just serving in their local church. And so I agree. Like, I would tell anybody listening, if you want to find out what your calling is in life, you want to know what God's hand is on you to do in this life, get in your church, find a place, and just start serving. God will reveal it to you as you go.
Yeah, I think that was like the biggest thing too. Like even for like the women, I think get serving in the Sunday school, learning about kids, all that stuff, that projected a lot of younger people to be teachers.
Yep.
To want to work with children, to want to help children. There was a lot of benefit in
Absolutely.
that, in going and getting your career, being a professional, whatever it may be. I mean, helping people, whatever it is, social work. It started in the church.
Yes.
Them seeing their parents maybe feed the homeless on Saturday morning or reach out to people. I mean, that heart for people. I think that's where it started, which is good.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
So when did you get the calling on your life, man? I mean, did it come right away? Did you think that would happen? Did you know?
I never in a million years would ever thought I'd be pastoring a church.
Really?
I think what helped me, and like I said, going back to just serving in our church, and over time you build a relationship with people, you understand the importance of ministry and things like that. But over time, God just began to put in my heart, like, there's more. And it fell in line with what I was already doing. So you think of someone like, King David, right? So he's out tending the sheep, right? Taking care of his father's sheep, serving in his dad's house, making sure everything's done right, protecting the sheep. Well, it was like God was preparing him for when he stepped into the king role, and he was basically not only taking care of sheep, now taking care of people, right? And so when I was serving at my home church with Pastor Omar and Praise Chapel Paramount at that time, it was like God was preparing my heart. And then one day I'm having a conversation with my pastor. He's like, hey, listen, I see the call of God. We've seen it through, you've been a youth pastor, an associate pastor, you run small groups, all these different things. What do you think about now stepping out on another level and starting church plant? And we said, well, I'm going to pray, and I just want to make sure that we're going to the place God wants us to go. And we did. So we went in the South Bay area. I took my family down there. Because we lived out here in this area. And so the Norwalk area. And, I said, if I'm going to go pastor in a city, then I'm going to move to that city. And so we own a home in Norwalk. We rented it out, and we moved actually to the South Bay area, to Torrance area, and we just planted ourselves, and that's when we started, man. We just went from there. But I think the call of God was confirmed by not only, my pastor seen it all my life and other leaders, but just my consistency of doing what God has called me to do where I was at. I think a lot of people are thinking too far ahead. And they're not, just be faithful where you are.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just be faithful where you are, and God will open those doors as you go forward.
You think that was like the building process to lead you there?
Absolutely.
Some people get saved, and they're like, within a few months, they're like, yeah, I knew I was going to be a pastor. And some people like go and take these steps in ministry, and then get to that point where, like,
for me, it was like that.
Yeah.
Like every and let me just transition here to the business world for a moment. Even when I worked, because I was working a full-time job, I worked for Aramark. I was in the refreshments division and in the uniform division. But
it's tough.
Yeah, it was tough, man.
I remember those days.
Remember those days?
I was in those days.
You were in those days too, man.
Yes.
So every position, then I moved into management, then I moved into sales, but every position that I moved into, I always felt underqualified. I've shared this with my son a number of times. I always felt like I moved into it, I'm not qualified for this. I don't feel like I'm ready for this. No matter what position it was, I always felt underqualified. But it was interesting, as I move into those positions, it's almost like I rise to the challenge. I step in and I rise to the challenge. And that's been like that my whole life, man. I've always stepped into an area and go, man, I don't feel I can do this. And then it just seems like I rise up to it. And it's been kind of my layout for me.
It's crazy how God qualifies the unqualified, right?
Exactly. And that's exactly right.
It's crazy. I think, I think, for me, I think, I'll just be transparent. I think there was a point in time where I felt like, in order to make a difference or in order to do something for God, I had to fall into a line of being a preacher or being a pastor, And it took me a long time, bro, to really realize, like, I'm effective. I think my dad kind of showed me that.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I seen his effectiveness. I've seen he discipled guys that became pastors, and I started looking like differently. And I was like, because I know we were in the realm there for a little bit of, hey man, everybody's going to get sent out one
Right,
day.
right. And we'll see how that worked out, right?
And I think what made it tough for me is like, and I think we can do a good segue for you here.
Yeah.
Is I think, everybody thinks that pastoring is like this gold mine for everybody. You know what I mean? And for me, I'm not saying it in a way of financial. Well, it could be, I think sometimes, but it's a hard road.
Very hard.
And so I didn't realize. And when I got married, here's my wife. She came from her dad was a pastor in Pomona. Your father-in-law went there. That's how I knew Taco. That's all. I didn't even know him by Tony.
Yeah,
I just know him by Taco.
Neither did I, man. I didn't know his name for like 5 years later. Like, what is your real name, man?
What's your real name? But then I was like ambitious because I thought, hey, I want to do something for God, and I want to be. And she was like, no.
Yep.
And after I was like, what do you mean? She goes, I will never do that. It's the hardest thing ever. You just don't understand. And I was like, and we would argue over that, bro. Like we have to be, this is what I feel. And And she was like, no, it's way harder than you think it is.
Yes.
And I think in going to that, I think the world thinks like, I always laugh when I see comments, like, oh, he's pastor, the church should be taxed, and all this craziness. And I'm like, you don't know that churches is rough.
Yes.
And you have to be called, and you really have to have a heart for people because it's not always easy, right?
100% agree with you, man. Your wife's got a lot of wisdom, man.
Thank you, wife.
Yeah, she got a lot of wisdom. I do believe that from experience, you're right. You have to be called, right? And again, the calling, I believe, it's developed kind of like a photo back in the days. Remember, you take a photo and nowadays you take it with your phone and it's just like in seconds you have 1,000 shots, right? But back then you just take a picture, it have to go be developed, right? And developed in the dark room, and then it brings it to light, brings to the surface what's actually in that photo. I would say the calling of God to be a pastor is similar to that process, that when you're serving in your local church, which I do believe that if you're going to be a pastor, you have to have a home church. You have to have a church that has a covering over you. You have to have a pastor that is over you, that can speak into your life. There has to be a level of submission to that church or that pastor. It's in when you're serving in that local church is where you're being developed. It's like what God has put in you is starting to be developed. Then the calling on that determines, again, what city you go to or what you feel called, whether it be a pastor or a missionary or whatever that is. But it is a very challenging thing. Like you can't just pick to be a pastor as an occupation. Like it has to be a calling, man.
Right.
It really does. But you'll know that as you're in the development process. God begins to reveal things to you. Prophetic words come over you, confirmation from other believers. Yeah. Your pastor begins to see that. Like, there's a lot of confirmation to help validate that calling on your life, right? But yes, pastoring is it's a blessing. It's a rewarding thing. It really is. But it is tough.
What is the hardest part about pastoring?
I would say one of the most difficult things of pastoring is when people leave. People leave you because you are investing your life into these people because you love them, right? You love them. You want to see the best for them. You're investing your emotional time into them. You're making a spiritual investment, and you're not just doing it with one, but you're trying to do it with as many as you can. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't always have to be a bad reason that they leave, but maybe they just move away or job opportunity comes up, they leave, or for whatever reason, and you feel that betrayal, like, man, they're leaving me. In all reality, they're just probably leaving because this opportunity has come up, but you don't see it that way. And for the first probably 5 years, when people would come in and they would leave for whatever reason, I took it personal, man. It was like personal, you know, and it's hard not to hold on to that, and so you start trying to manipulate, like, well, you should just stay, maybe give them ministry. Oh, why don't you take this ministry on? You try to find ways to keep them.
Right.
And God dealt with me that a long time was, you can't do that. First of all, they're not your people. Yeah. They're my people. Yeah. And I'm working in their life, and I've given you, the ability to speak into their life, and you're going to help me shepherd them, but you're not controlling their life. They have a free will, and I have a plan for them too. So to be able to love people with an open hand is key for a pastor. When you go out, and let me just say this, every pastor I think that goes out to start a church thinks they're going to have a mega church. Like, we're going to have a mega church, man. We're going to go out, we're going to do some things. And, a year from now, we're going to have a mega church. And it's not always like that. Right. And actually, it's far and few.
The majority of churches are 100 people or less.
100 people or less. Yeah. Right. Like 90% or something like that. And it's not a bad thing, as long as the mindset behind it is you're investing in people's lives. It's not, the way I look at it for our church, and I tell my leaders and my pastors this, is that, we are investing not just now, but for the next generation. We have to be a generational church. We have to think generationally. I don't want this church just to be here, and then when I die one day or something happened, God forbid, that the church just closes down. It should be positioned that when I go, or, whatever it is, that the church continues on for generations, that your great grandkids will be able to serve in this church one day. We have to think generationally, right? And so to think generationally, you have to see the bigger picture and look past the temporary hurts, the temporary disappointments, the temporary setbacks, all those things. If you're thinking bigger picture, then it's just a setback. It's just a disappointing moment, but it's not the end. We keep going. We keep moving forward. And so I think pastoring, one of the hardest things for me has been that early season where when people leave, it's tough. I took it personal, but thank God he's helped me come a long way from that.
I bet you there's times when you're like, please leave.
That's a whole nother subject, man.
I mean, let's just be honest. There's probably times where like, God bless you, man. But I wish you guys would just leave. No,
I got to share this, man. This is funny. There was a time, some people are just kind of wigging out, and you do have those people that are just like, I think here's a list of churches in the city that if you want to try them, why don't you give them the shot?
There's Pastor Eddie. He has a church that's not too far from us.
Hey, go check this church out, man. Go down there. And I remember calling. This is the early years, and there was a couple people that are just being real difficult to deal with, and they had left. And I hadn't seen them. And back in those early days, you called everybody, like people, because, you're a smaller church, so you know everybody, so you can reach out to them. And I called my pastor, and I said, Pastor, they haven't been coming, they haven't been showing up. And it was that one couple I was having a little difficult time with. And I go, should I go reach out to them or call them? And he said this, he goes, and not unless you want them back. And I thought about it and go, do I want them back? And I was like, you know what? Maybe I just won't call them back. What I mean? So, you're dealing with people. Ministry, right. Preaching, pastoring is a people business. It's what it is. And I say that, lightly. It's a people business. If you don't love people and you are annoyed by people and people get under your skin then pastoring is not for you, because it is a people business, man. You have to learn to work with all types of people, all types of personalities. It's just a smorgasbord, man, of personalities and behaviors and attitude. And I believe this, that as leaders, our job is to impart into them truth, but at the same time, we got to give them correction and grace and all that to work with them. And as you do that, God begins to shape and mold them. But again, they're God's people. They're not our people. And so that's something big. If you're going to start a church, remember that. They're God's people. They're not your people.
I think you've always been, I always like this about you. You've always been consistent in your attitude. Or I know what to expect when I see Pastor Mando.
Yeah.
Right? Smile on your face. Hey, brother, genuine. I love that about you. Was that always you, or was that developed?
No, man, that's been developed. I in my early years, and I said even as I was serving in the church, I'm very competitive. Okay, so being a Raider fan, being a sports fan, I'm very competitive. Grew up playing ball, baseball, football, basketball. I was very competitive what I did, and so I hated to lose. I still hate it today, but I've learned to deal with it.
The Raiders will humble you.
Yeah, I've been humbled. That's why I think God made me a Raider fan, man. He's like, you need to be a Raider fan because you need to learn that. And we've been losing for the last 30 years, man, right? And so, but I've learned through this process that things are not always going to go my way. And I think that's a misconception for believers, that if I'm saved, everything has to fall the way I need it to fall. Like, it has to happen my way. And that's one thing that God shook me in the beginning. Like, things are going to happen my way, not your way. And I've had to learn to adjust to that. Like, okay, God, I could be strong-willed, I can be competitive, but I realize I'm not gonna win every battle. Yeah. I'm not gonna win at everything. There's gonna be times I do suffer loss. There's gonna be times I do suffer setbacks and disappointments. How am I going to handle that? And God began to deal with me. How are you going to approach that? So like every time it doesn't go your way, you're going to fall apart. Every time it doesn't go your way, you're going to run back to the world. Every time it doesn't go your way, you're going to, turn your back on me. And so you have to learn how to deal with when things don't go your way. And that's been a lesson that God has worked in me for a number of years. And it's helped me to see, again, the bigger picture that, I may lose a game, but ultimately we're going to win the war.
Yeah, I think that's huge, man. I think we get into the realm of comparison.
Yeah.
It's very easy with church,
Yep.
Hey, this guy got 500-600 people.
Yep.
I got 80. You know
Right.
what I mean? I think I was thinking about this, like you get into you kind of when you get into that realm of comparing, you lose out on your wins.
Yep.
Right? I was like, I got some wins here. There's some L's here.
Huge
wins.
wins.
But there's some wins. Like I need to bank those wins.
Yeah.
When we start just focusing on the L's that we've taken or the mistakes or the things we don't have.
Right.
When we start like, man, Lord, what the heck? What about me?
Right.
And I think the Lord's probably sitting up there and he's kind of like saying, what? Hey, did you remember this win I gave you and this win I gave you? And remember that your kids are still in church and they love God, they love me and they respect you. Like that was great. You've had a great marriage. You know what I mean? Like I saved your family. I changed the course of your family. You may not have all these things over here, but I've given you these things.
Exactly.
I think it's very easy to focus on the L's, but we surpass the W's.
Exactly. And I think that's why social media is so dangerous, right?
Yes.
And so I think mental health is a big issue in our culture today, especially with younger people, the suicide rate off the charts, right? Because of that very reason. They're looking on social media saying, my life is not as good as their life. Yeah. Why not? I'm doing the same things that they're doing. I'm involved in my church. I'm, trying to, stay faithful. And yet it looks like their life is better than mine. It's a false narrative of reality, right? So it doesn't validate their life. It actually takes away from. And whenever you compare yourself to somebody and say, okay, so they have this, I have this, they have more, whatever, you are actually devaluing who you are, who God created you to be. It's almost like a slap in the face to God, because you're saying, okay, God, the way you made me, what you've blessed me with is not good enough. And because you're comparing that and saying, and like you just said it, hit it right on the nose, man, like all these things God has done for you. And I'm sure if you sat down, I always encourage my congregation whenever I do around Thanksgiving time, when everybody's doing their Thanksgiving sermons, and I sit down and make a list. Sit down and make a list. Do it on your phone. Do it on a pad and paper. Make a list of everything God has done in your life that you consider a blessing. And then make a list of the negative. And I can guarantee you that list of all the good things God has done for you is 10 times the amount of the things that you feel are negative. And a lot of times we don't see it that way, but that's important, man.
I think it's very important. I think Israel Campbell said it best when he came in, and I think we were talking about haters, mm-hmm. and he just said, he goes, hey, you have to learn to celebrate other people's wins. Like you got to learn to celebrate that. And you got to tell yourself or tell God, hey, God, if you did it for them, why can't you do it for me?
Yeah. It's true,
and that changed a lot of people's perspective when he said that. They were like, "Man, that was so good! Like I never looked at it that way." That takes the haterade in your life out really quick.
It does, and at the same time celebrating the wins. But it's also if you want to take it to a sports analogy, it's good sportsmanship. Like, you see these guys, they lose a game and they walk across the field and they're shaking hands. And of course they don't feel like doing that, but they understand this is a character move here. So when you celebrate the wins of others, it's a character move, right? When you congratulate somebody, maybe something that you wanted, but they got it, you congratulate them. It's a character move, right? So those are things that help sustain your character, and then also positions you so God can trust you with the greater things. Because if you're not faithful with the little, man, God will never give you more.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Street Gospel Podcast. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Elevate Ministries. Elevate Ministries is an authentic, passionate, and innovative church in the heart of Orange County, California. They strive to make their services welcoming and encouraging by intentionally engaging you in all senses to stimulate a spiritual hunger. If you're looking for a great church that's on a mission to change the world one person at a time, I encourage you to check them out at www.elevateministries.com and on Instagram at Elevate Ministries. Bro, I'm not congratulating and shaking hands with no KC fans or Charger fans after we lose them, man.
I'm with you on that one.
You know, I don't rub it in though. When we get the W, I don't rub it in. I mean, I take my W and I might celebrate a little bit on the ground, but I don't try to rub it in on. I don't be sending messages to my friends that are Charger fans. So I try to have good sportsmanship, but I let them celebrate their thing. I don't say anything, or I don't next time, or we're still the Raiders.
You know why we don't do that? Because we're not very sure when we're going to win the next game, man. So we know we can't talk too much, man.
How did you become a Raider fan?
Los Angeles Coliseum, man.
Me
I was
too.
remember, I think 83 we won, we beat the Redskins, right, in the Super Bowl, Marcus Allen, and I remember, Marcus, I was 9 years old, and then of course 87, Bo Jackson comes onto the scene, and Bo Jackson, one of the greatest running backs of all time. Oh man, love Bo. And
I was at that game. He got hurt.
Were you at that game?
I was at that game
against the Bengals.
Yep.
Was it the Bengals? And so I've always been a Raider fan, man, from the beginning. And
I tell everybody, if you want a good church, you need to have some solid Raider fans in your church. The church is built upon toughness and grit and learning how to take a loss and keep and resiliency. If you have Raider fans in your church, trust me, it's going to be successful.
Yeah, Raider fans are the greatest, man. I mean, they're violent and they can.
We need that.
Yeah, they're violent.
Sometimes we need that. People act up in church, and you need to lay hands.
A couple Raider fans in there to keep the control. Yeah, all my Raider fans work security and ushers, man. So we keep the order, man. Keep the order. But yeah, so I again love the Raiders, man, and it's been a tough 30 years, man. I think the big issue with the Raiders, and I've said a couple of times, is that it's leadership, man. How many coaches we've switched over the years, how many quarterbacks, the turnover in our administration is ridiculous. Yeah. And to have a winning team, to have a successful organization, you have to have trust, right? You have to build trust. You can't do that when you're always turning people over, right? And so leadership is one of the things that I think is an issue for the Raiders. The other thing I've heard someone say before, you can lose a game, because you will lose games, but you can't lose the locker room. And we've lost the locker room a lot in the past 30 years. And that's one of the reasons why we struggle the way we do. Hopefully AP will turn it around.
Man.
Hopefully he'll turn it around, man. Hey, man. I hope he will.
Compton,
man. NWA. I knew those guys, man. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I think you hit it on the head, though. I think trust.
Yeah.
Trust with anything, right? Trust in the church, and leadership. You need that in the church. I think the trust, a lot of things come with trust.
Yeah.
Discipline, commitment. Yeah. You got consistency.
Yes.
It all comes with trust. If you're all those things, somehow the people in your church know what to expect.
Yes.
I think people in general want to know what to expect and what they're going to get out of you every time. And when we're inconsistent or we're not trustworthy, you just lose people really fast.
Integrity, your character, being a person of your word. If you say it, do it. I'm very careful with my words as far as back in the early day. And it's one thing to speak vision. We want to speak vision, but you don't want to say so much that you don't deliver on, right? And so many people are talking, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to make this, and then they don't deliver on any of that, and you lose credibility and you lose trust. So I'm very careful with my words now on what I say we're going to do. If I can't do it, then I won't say it. And I'll get a text from maybe a group text from people in the church or another group and say, hey, we're going to do this. Are you going to come? If I haven't looked at my calendar, I won't respond, because before I respond, I want to make sure that I can be there. It just builds trust. Trust gives you influence, and it's like steering a ship. With influence, the ship steers a lot more easier than when you don't have influence, man. And it just takes a longer time, right? And so, trust builds influence, and you need influence as a leader. You need influence.
So how does a guy that didn't have any of that in his life become a good leader?
I think, again, going back to the early days in the church, watching people or getting close to people that I wanted to kind of emulate, that were good leaders. So you look for somebody that is leading in the way you would like to lead and have the influence you like to have, and then you begin to emulate that. Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ, right? And so Paul was sold out. He was committed. The things that came against him, he was unwavering in his commitment to Christ, and the message that he preached never changed in spite of the circumstances, right? And so getting around people with consistency help you become consistent, right? Who you surround yourself with, eventually you become like. So I think your inner circle, if you surround yourself with great leaders and people that you aspire to be like, you become one. It goes back to that old Proverbs, and I want to say it's Proverbs 16, where it says that bad company corrupts good morals or good character, right? So who you surround yourself with, eventually you turn out to be. And so that's helped me, at least. If there is a level of great leadership within me, it's been probably the sum total of people that I've surrounded myself with.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. What do you think is the biggest problem amongst like men in the church, young men, right now? Because we I saw a stat. I forgot. I should have wrote it down. I said it at church a few months back, maybe, and it said that there's a greater number of mothers that take their kids to church than fathers.
Right.
The fathers stay home,
right.
Maybe watch the Raider game,
yeah,
unfortunately,
yeah,
right?
Unfortunately.
And then I'm sure you see some decrease during the football season a little bit. And then the mothers go with the kids.
Right.
Or the father's just not resilient or disciplined or committed, kind of a little bit unattached. What do you think's the main problem with young men or young fathers or fathers and husbands in general?
Well, I think that, when it comes to men, we think differently, right? We think different about life, about situations, about circumstances. Our mindsets are a little different behind certain things that happen. But the vision, at least one of the things that we've preached recently, and I know it's been preached for years, is if you get the men, you get the family, right? I mean, that's the statistics of when the man comes and gets saved and is plugged into the church, the statistics that his family would come is like 90-some%. It's like extremely high that the wife, the kids will follow, versus if the woman comes and gets saved, it's like 40 or 50% that the husband and the kids will come. So our focus, our ministries, we have to have good men's ministries. We do, man. We have to have good ministries and events that are geared towards men, right? Men's conferences, men's retreats, men's small groups. And we do have that in our church, right? We push that a lot because a lot of times these guys, and I'll speak from my own personal example. It's not easy for men to open up, right? We hold stuff in.
Oh, yeah.
We do. It's not easy. And so the mindset for maybe for some men is when they come to church that, they're going to ask me to talk about some of my feelings. And I want to talk about my feelings. I don't want to talk about those personal things. I don't want to talk about any of those issues. And so, we gear it towards transparency. We geared it towards openness. And a lot of times men don't want that. So you have to gear sometimes some particular ministries for men and slowly work through that process with them. Because we have men's ministries and guys, when they first came in, didn't say a word, just listened. But now some of these guys are preaching, they're teaching, what happened? Because it took a while to break through some of those barriers. So I would say, when it comes to some of the reasons why men have a hard time coming to church, I think it's because of the mindset that when I come in, am I going to have to talk about my feelings? Am I going to have to talk about, and I don't think they're ready to do that. So we have to create an avenue or a way where guys can come in and be themselves and give them the time they need to get past that and to begin to open up. Because it's only when they open up that God begins to heal and begin to move in their life.
I was tripping out on there's I think another problem is the different forms of manhood. And I'm not talking about transgender.
Right.
But I for example, Jacob and Esau.
Right.
Jacob stayed in the house like to cook.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Esau was this warrior, right?
Right.
But they both, we tend to lean more to the Esau.
True.
We got to be this brute of a guy
True.
and be the hunter and bring the food in.
True.
And we forget about that, like Jacob, and here is, he's going to be a leader and he's going to be used and all these great things that he's going to do. And I think we have different forms of in our mind of what true manhood, and the Lord began to challenge me on that. Like, everybody's not going to be into jujitsu or shooting guns, Dave, or into the things that you're like. But does that make them any less of a man in God's eyes? And I was like, no. And
Yeah.
I began to read, the Jacob and Esau thing. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah. I mean, but Lord, I still would rather be more like Esau. Like, that's my thing.
That's a good point, though.
But then God said, that's fine.
Yeah.
You can be the Esau, the Jephthah, whatever. You can be
Yeah.
like that. But there's going to be some guys that might be a little bit more different than you, but they're still powerful men of God. And I think I began to like welcome that in where I'm like, okay, well, this guy's not like me.
Yeah.
Or not into the things I like, but that doesn't make him anything less. But with that said, I think there's certain characteristics of being a man that every man should have.
I agree.
Right?
I agree with that. And I think you're right, Dave. I think that the church should be a place of safety. Like whoever you are, you should be able to feel comfortable walking into your church, whether you're that hunter or that cooker, right? You're cooking like we have chefs in our church, man.
Yeah.
They love cooking. Then we have those who love guns and going out and shooting and jujitsu and all. But the church should be a safe place for everybody. And you can come in and you can be who you are, right? And so just making that, it built into the culture of the church, speaking always life into the congregation, off the pulpit. Listen, everyone's welcome to come and be a part of what God is doing here. But I agree with you. I think there's different men. They think a little differently. They're bent a little differently. But God can use anyone.
Yeah, that's the body, right?
Yep, it's the
That's
body of Christ. It's the body of Christ.
It's made up of a bunch of different parts put together.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, I think that was I was fighting God on that because I think no, Lord, like, we're supposed to be these guys, these warriors. We're supposed to be like, like not David the shepherd, David the warrior.
Right, exactly. But it took those shepherding years, and it took the running for 15 years from Saul, hiding in caves and, running for his life, climbing out of windows and hiding, from Saul and ducking, and that all of those experiences that led him to be not just a king, but a great king. And then of course we know he had his failures and his falls and stuff, but all those things shaped him to be the king he was. And according to Scripture, God's favorite king.
Right. And once again, going back to that little foundational steps, right?
Yes.
From here, being great here, being great there.
Yes.
Keep growing, and then becoming the man that He's called you to be.
Yes.
Now you weren't always this easygoing guy that didn't have a care in the world. I know you have a lot of cares in the world.
Yeah, a lot of cares.
And I say that because a few years back, I would say your faith through your health and probably everything was tested.
Absolutely.
Right? You became sick and almost to the point of death.
Yeah, pretty much almost a death.
And I know we've talked about this before, but I think when you're a pastor, I think people think that you're just going to breeze through something like that.
Yeah.
What happened and how did that affect you, not only as a pastor, just as a believer, and test your faith?
So in 2002, I think it was, I was at work one day and just wasn't feeling very well. I want to say it was 24, 25 years old. And I remember calling my wife on the phone and saying, hey, listen, I need to make a doctor's appointment. I'm just not feeling very well. Been having some dizzy spells, feeling fatigue, and, making sure I was hydrated and stuff. And so make sure I was fine there. And so I made an appointment, went to the doctors, did a full physical, did some blood work. And a couple days later, I get a call from the doctor and he says, hey, listen, you need to come back in. We got to run some more tests. And I'm like, okay. Like on what? And he says, well, some of your numbers are a little off on a couple of things. We don't, not concerned yet, but we just want to check some more things out. So I went back in, they did some more labs, and then I get a call about a week later. The doctor says, okay, we kind of narrowed it down to what the problem is. And he said, you're having some issues with your kidneys. And I'm going, okay, my kidneys. And he goes, yeah, we need to do a biopsy now. And I think I was a little naive. I didn't really understand the severity of it. But he says, this is very important. We need to do this right away. And so I went in and I'm thinking, okay, this is moving pretty fast. Like what's really going on here?
Super young.
Yeah, super young. I felt, I was feeling a little under the weather, but I didn't feel like I was sick, right? And went in, did a kidney biopsy. And then a few days later, or probably about a week later, he calls me and says, okay, you have this rare kidney disease. You need to come in. We're going to talk about it. And I remember going in, sitting with him, me and my wife, and he's just laying this thing out, man, like, you're really sick. These kidneys, they're failing on you. They're deteriorating, is what he said. That's the word he used. And, he named the disease is FSGS. And he says, I go, how did I get this? Is it hereditary? And he's like, no. He goes, not hereditary, but we really don't know how people get it, but it's a rare kidney disease. And he says, you're very ill. And I go, I don't even feel that bad, man. I think I'm doing okay. And he goes, no. He goes, your numbers are completely off the charts. Wow. He says, within 5 years, you're going to need a transplant, or you're going to be on dialysis. Or he goes, or you'll be dead. I mean, that's how. And I'm 26 years old, I think, at the time. Or I go, it just rocked me when he said that. It rocked me. So I'm 26 years old, 27 years old. At the time, I was the youth pastor in Paramount. So I was leading the youth there. I remember walking out of the hospital with my wife, and we didn't say a word. We met there, came 2 different cars. We met there, and as we're walking out of the lobby, we're not saying a word to each other. She looks at me and she says, are you going to be okay, honey? I mean, we're praying and everything's going to be okay. And I looked at her and I go, no, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And I got in the car. She got in the car. We're supposed to go home. I remember jumping in my car, jumped on the freeway, and drove down the highway. I don't remember what time it was, but there wasn't that much traffic. But I was like Fast and Furious on the highway. I just floored it, man. Must have been going 90 miles an hour. And I was so angry. I was furious. And it's like all these emotions started coming out, and I'm going like, why is this happening now? Like, God, I'm doing your will here. I'm a youth pastor. Been serving in the church, and I'm only 27 years old. I can't deal with it. Like, I was so angry. And I calmed down. I even think Pastor Adam, I think my wife called Pastor Adam, and Adam called me. And he's like, and this is after I had calmed down a little bit. And he said, hey, man, just let you know, bro, you're going to be fine. And we're praying for you. And he kind of calmed me down a little bit, So from that time on, it was this journey of dealing with the sickness. They put me on steroids. They put me on different type of medications and see if they can kind of reverse it. And that didn't work. They were considering a chemotherapy type treatment. But my doctor's like, well, if we go that route, man, we can really force this thing and force your immune system to take a big hit, and that could work against you. And so all this time, man, it's just progressively, I'm getting worse. And the youth at that time some of our young people were going and getting tested to see if they could be a match for a transplant. Nobody was a match. And so as time's going on here, I'm like dying. I'm like getting sick.
How long is that going on for?
So I was 27, so probably 4 years, 3 or 4 years.
And you're progressively
getting worse. Yeah, I'm getting worse. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, gasping for air. I couldn't breathe. And calling the emergency and having to go rush into the emergency because my lungs were filling with fluid because my kidneys weren't filtering. So can't breathe. My potassium level was off the charts. And, potassium is what they give, the lethal injection. People, they put to death. They first they numb them, and then they give them a high dose of potassium. That's all it is. It stops their heart. So my potassium levels were so high that my heart could have just stopped. And so I'm sick. I'm losing my taste buds. I'm fatigued. Now, here's the crazy thing is that I'm a youth pastor. We have this conversation with Pastor Omar, and he says, hey, listen, I know you're dealing with this. And, I know we talked about you pastoring and launching. And he says, I'm going to leave this up to you because I don't want to stop you from going out if you feel called. But at the same time, I don't want to push it on you either because of what you're dealing with. And I remember thinking at that time, well, if I'm going to die, I'd rather die doing what God has called me to do. I would rather die doing what I feel I love doing and the kingdom, which I was going back to the history of Praise Chapel, right? Going back to those discipleship years and militant. Like, I want to do what I love doing. Let's go.
You die on the field of battle.
I'll die on the field of battle. I'm not going to hide from this, or I'm not going to, try to find a way to make my life more comfortable or convenient and just kind of coast. I'm going to do what I love doing. And so we went out. We started the church with me like dying, like literally dying, man. And
how many kids?
All three of my kids.
Wow.
And so all of this happening, and we went into it, and I don't need the church didn't even know. I didn't tell the church anything.
So at that point, you really have to feel called.
You really have to feel called.
That
man.
young, 3 kids dying,
and going to taking the answer to the call to pastor, man. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. And I'm trying to think bigger picture, man. This is what God wanted me to do. And I'm not going to let the circumstance stop me. Now, if God doesn't want me to do it, I'm sure he's big enough to let me know this is not what I want you to do. But I didn't feel that. I really felt the Holy Spirit saying, I got you. You just do what I asked you to do. And so we went out, we saw revival those early years. And I'm up there and I can remember preaching and, I'm preaching and I'm trying to catch my breath because, my lungs, so I'm preaching and I'm trying to catch my breath and I'm going, man, I might even die while I'm preaching one Sunday, man. I just come up here and preach. And
so when you were doing the old church thing, friend of mine,
yeah, that wasn't
I want
the
to let
preaching.
you know, you were really taking the breath.
I was really taking the breath, bro. That wasn't the preaching, man. I was trying to get some air in my lungs, man. And so this is where where we are, and we're preaching, we're having a good time. Church is growing, things are happening, and I'm getting worse. And
what are the mind battles in your head? What's going on?
One day, my greatest fear was that I'd be up there preaching and I'd die on the pulpit. That was like, God, if you're going to take me, can we at least do this when I'm sleeping? Like, I don't want to be on the pulpit and just drop dead. That's some of the thoughts I'm thinking, man.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
To have those thoughts, like I go up there and when I preach and I'm thinking I always have this fear that I'm gonna cuss. I'm not a cusser, but for some reason it always gets in my head like, do not cuss. And I'm like, I don't cuss. Why does it always pop? You're over here thinking, I'm going to die.
Yeah, I don't want to die. If I could just finish the sermon and not die, that would be great, God.
It's crazy.
And so during that time, I had, people praying for me. I mentioned Billy Hall came and prayed for me. Bobby Menchaca came to my house, prayed over me.
Great men of God.
Great men of God.
Seen miracles in their life.
Absolutely. I'm reaching out. I get a call from Diga. Diga calls and he says, hey.
Diga Hernandez on the show. He was on the show. He was here.
And he says, hey, listen, Benny Hinn is doing this crusade in Long Beach Aquarium. I'd love for you to come with me. And
how many years is this later after your diagnosis?
So this is probably, 27, 26, I was diagnosed. This might have been, it was like 5 years later. So maybe like when I was 31, because we already started the church, if I'm not mistaken. No, it was a little later than that. Maybe 30, 32, 33, maybe like 7 years later.
So you've been battling 8 years.
Yes.
And still serving.
It's still serving, but we have to understand about kidneys. Kidneys filter out the blood. And so whatever you eat, whatever you drink, whatever it is, the kidneys are like the filtration system. So if the filtration system is not working, it's like toxins are getting backed up into your body. So when that happens, everything, your body, your skin color changes, your eyes, everything affects the whole body and the other organs in the body. So he calls me. I said, okay, let's go. All right. At this point, because I was meeting with the doctor and he's like, okay, we got to get you on dialysis now. And I was fighting it.
Dialysis is rough, man.
It is.
Every day,
or at least 3 or 4 times a week.
That's
right.
Tough.
So I'm fighting this and I'm like, man, I don't want to go on dialysis, but she's like, well, if you don't, you're going to die. Right. So you got to do this. And so around that time, Diga called me, and that's when he invited me to the Benny Hinn thing. And he goes, I got front row seats for us. So we're sitting in the front row. Pastor Adam came with us. So it was me, it was Diga, and it was Pastor Adam. We're sitting in the front row. And so I'm thinking to myself, and I've watched Benny Hinn for years, right? I've seen miracles and all this and that. And so Benny Hinn's preaching right in front of me. And I'm thinking, man, if he just throws his jacket on me, like if he just waves, I know I'm going to be healed, man. Like God positioned me in this front row because he's going to wave and he's going to throw his jacket on me or something's going to happen. I'm going to get healed. And
I just need to touch the hem of his cloth.
Touch the hem of his cloth. I just need to touch that jacket, man. I touch that jacket. Or just, how about it's just a Stacey Adams? If I can just touch them shoes, man, I'll be. And so, so the way, if you ever seen him or been in one of his crusades, he doesn't really lay hands on people. He just pray, and the Holy Spirit touches people's lives, right? Then he says, hey, if you feel God healed you, come on up here and testify.
Right.
So,
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Are you super desperate at this point?
Desperate.
Okay.
Desperate. I'm like, this is it. Like, I need a miracle, man. This has to happen. And so with that, with me being in the proximity of, and I people have their own feelings about Benny Hinn. I've got to spend time with him personally. I've been to his house. I've sat with him. This man has a great heart, man. I mean, he really does. I know he's changed his doctrine about prosperity and all that recently, but he does have a big heart, man.
Yeah.
And so I'm there, and people were getting healed, and people come up, and I didn't feel a thing, man. I didn't feel anything. And so Adam took off. He was like, hey, I got to head out. So he headed out right after it was over. Diga was heading out. And I'm getting ready to leave, and I'm leaving just as angry as I had received the news the first time. I'm walking out angry. And I'm angry at God. I'm angry at God. I'm angry at God because I feel like I'm doing everything I need to do, and you're still not healing me. I don't understand that. Like, why is it taking so long? Why won't you just heal me? I'm not out here, doing things of the world. I'm doing your work. Why not just heal me?
So can I ask you a question about
sure.
that? Is it okay to be angry with God?
Absolutely. I think that God is not intimidated by our frustrations or our anger or, our concerns. But that's why he says, bring it to me. Like, if you have a problem with me, come tell me about it. Cast all your cares and concerns on me. And I think a lot of believers today have a hard time with that. Like, I feel this towards God. I'm wrong. Well, tell him.
Yeah.
Tell him, man.
We act like he doesn't know already.
He already knows, man. He already knows you're bothered with him. Tell him.
Just tell him.
Job told him. And then finally God says, well, let me ask you a question. Where were you when I created the heavens and the earth? And you know what Job said? You know what? Never mind.
Back down.
I back down. So
I think that's so important, though, man.
It
Because I
is.
think a lot of people let that build up inside and they don't release it. And it's like, didn't you know that God already knows how you feel anyways?
Yep.
So you might as well tell him.
absolutely, man. Absolutely. So I'm getting ready to walk out, and then from the corner of the building, I think it was Theo Kulianos. He looked and he saw me and he waved me back, and so I reluctantly walked back over there because I was already out the door. And he goes, "Hey, listen, I want my father-in-law to pray for you," and in his office. So I go backstage, and there's a line of people, man, to go in his office. There's like 50 people to get into this room. I'm the last one. And I already told you, man, I hate lines. Like, I hate traffic. I hate lines. If I'm at the bank and there's a long line, I hate waiting in lines.
You're probably thinking, like, out of the 50 here, there's probably going to be 8 that are going to be healed. And
I've got to fall into that percentage, man. Come on. Like, at least, God, you got to,
I'm just thinking in man terms, right? I'm not thinking in spiritual terms.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in our carnal flesh terms.
Right.
Like, how many of those people are going to be healed?
Yeah. My other thought was, man, like, what kind of, are they counseling in there, man? Because I don't want to be here all night.
Right.
So, no joke, I waited in that line for 2 more hours.
No way. Man.
I get to the front of the line. And again, man, this whole time, I'm like wrestling with God, man. I'm angry.
That's a long time to wrestle.
I'm angry with God, and I'm angry that I'm in this line, right, for this long. And I think that might have been more.
I better get healed if I wait in this line.
If I wait in
this
this
long.
line, man, if I'm waiting, if I'm in a line in Disneyland, man, I better get on that ride.
Exactly.
So
It better be worth it.
It better be worth it, man. So I get to the front, and I go into his office, and it's just him, Theo. I can't remember. Maybe Diga was in there, or somebody else was in there with him. And he looks at me, and Theo says, "Hey, tells him, this pastor here, he needs a miracle. His kidneys are failing. He needs a miracle." And I walk up to him, and I close my eyes and I lift my hands, and I'm waiting for him to lay his hands on me, right? And I look up, and he says, "I want to pray for you, but because he's in his jeans already and his street clothes, and he's like, but I don't feel like I want to do it here.
Oh, you don't have the suit on.
I don't have the suit on, man, and the jacket, And he goes, I don't want to do it here. I want you to come to my studio Thursday, and this is, I think, it was a Sunday night, Thursday or Tuesday or whatever. And he says, I want to pray for you there. And I can remember thinking, you got to be kidding me, man.
Yeah, bro. At that point, I was like, nah,
yeah,
man.
you got to be kidding me. And so I walked out again, and I'm like, God, are you like just messing with me now? I mean, this is like, and here's what I think at that time. I think that all these feelings that I had have always been there, and God was drawing it out. Like, God was, you'd be surprised of when you go through those hard times, God draws out those things that were already there. And I think those attitudes and these mindsets and these paradigms that we have about God, about our lives, about the future, it's already in our hearts. And then God has to get it out and say, okay, we got to get this stuff out. You know, I'm not causing it. I'm just bringing it out, you know? And so I end up leaving, bothered. And I wasn't even going to go. And then Diga calls me and says, we're going, right? And I was like trying to get out of it. He's like, no, man, I'm picking you up. We're going. So Diga comes, he picks me up, and we go to his studio, and it's a Tuesday or Thursday, but now we go into his office before the event, and he's talking, he's showing me his office, and we're just talking. He goes, okay, we're going to pray for you out when we have the service. I go, okay, sounds good. You know, so we go out there, he sits me on stage with him. He's ministering to the people. It's probably 2,000 people there at his Bible study. Great service, great message. He preached an incredible word. And before he preached, he calls me up and says, hey, Pastor Mando, come on up here, tell the congregation what you're going through. And so I'm up there sharing like I'm sharing with you. This is what I'm battling. I need a miracle on this. And then I go sit back down, and he goes, after service, we're going to pray for our pastor. And then he goes on with his message. Service ends. He's praying for people. People are coming forward, laying hands on people. People are getting touched and delivered. I'm still sitting in the back. Okay. Me and my wife are sitting back there. And, so I'm waiting, and I'm kind of like, you know, just for him to call me up to pray for me. And looking, man, just kind of just throwing the flag. Hey, don't forget about me, man. Brother. Don't forget. We've been waiting way too long for this. And he forgot. He was ready to close the service out. And I'm going, this is no way, God, this cannot happen, you know? And you know, the thing too, I think I was putting too much on a man. Like, you know, it can only happen this way.
But in desperation,
you're looking for anything, right? You're like, God, you can use anybody. So he's about to close it up, and I put my head down, and again, all these thoughts coming to myself. And then he looks back and goes, oh, we got to pray for our pastor here. And I go, okay, about time, man. About time. We're waiting for this.
Here comes
the miracle, right?
Yeah.
Here comes the miracle. This
right.
is what we've been waiting for. I've been praying for this. It's about to happen. Finally, it's going to happen. And he comes over to me, and he puts his hand out, and he starts prophesying over me. And he starts saying, God has taken you down this road for a reason. And you can be trusted with this adversity. And God is going to use your testimony. And he just starts prophesying to the world. People are going to know what you've been through, and they're going to touch lives, inspire lives. And you had to go through that. And I'm waiting for the healing prayer. Like, it's healed. And he just says, God, use him. Like, he never really prayed healing. He just prayed God would use this to be a testimony for him. And, but something happened to me that moment, and it shifted something in me. Like, I get it now, God, that this what I'm facing is not, it's for me to some degree to bring some things out that have been there, but ultimately it's for you. You want to use this for your glory. And so fast forward ahead, I come home from work one day, and my wife, we're sitting at the dinner table, and my wife says, hey, listen, I went to the doctor. And she didn't tell me this, you know. She goes, I went to the doctor to see, to run some tests for me to see if I could be a match for you. And I'm like, okay. She says, the doctor just called me, earlier today and said that I'm a match, that I'm a perfect match. And when they do matches, and again, I don't know all the details of it, but it's like a 1 through 5, 2 through 5, like 5 and 5 match is like, what do you call it? Like, identical twins, you know, like the DNA. So we were like a 4 out of 5 match, which put us pretty close to almost being related, man, which is pretty crazy. So I figured, come out of Praise Chapel, man. We never know the history there, right? Like, we were related.
Where was Taco at?
Yeah, where was Taco, man? Let me do the tree here, man. See where, but we were so close of a match. The doctor says, it's incredible you're this close. And so, it just, you know, my doctor said, we got to get you in right away. Let's do this right away so we don't have to put you on dialysis. So it was October 30th, 2008. We went into UCLA Medical Center, and my wife donated a kidney and saved my life, man. Saved my life.
Wow.
It was a miracle. To this day, going 15 years later, however long it's been, no complications. I mean, I take a lot of medication to help. I never had to go on dialysis. God preserved me from that. And the miracle was right next to me the whole time. Like the girl I met, 13.
Yeah.
Married at 17,
crazy.
Had kids with, grandkids with, who've grown up together with. It was like, I'm looking for the miracle all over the place, and God's saying, it's right there with you. I gave you the miracle
The whole
already.
time.
The whole time it's been there. You've been stressing out over the way you want me to do it. The miracle's already here. I already got it for you. And here's the thing, and I think this is where a lot of people struggle too. They want the miracle quick and fast, because they don't want to deal with all of the problems that come with it or the struggle that comes with it. And I think with God, he's like, no, that struggle, you need it. You need it. It works for your good. And so 15 years, kidney's doing well. I go every 3 months for checkups, blood work. There's a lot of things, but the biggest thing that came out of this, David, was that my heart, it changed. And going back to your question about, have you always been this way? Have you been through? I've been through some stuff, man, that has totally changed the way I look at life, look at people, even view God. And I'm so grateful for it, man. I'm so grateful for every struggle that I've been through, or I wouldn't know God the way I know him today.
It's so crazy that if you went all the way back to the 13 and 14-year-olds that were having sex,
Yeah.
get pregnant, everybody thinks it's the biggest mistake.
Yeah.
The daughter you had probably tied you guys in for a
Right.
while, right?
Right.
You get saved, go to church, and like you said, that God knew the miracle years,
Yes.
20 years before it happened.
Right.
But crazy how he works like that.
I know.
Like it was right. Like you said, it was right there. The miracle was there the whole time. And what the carnal eye or the world seen as that this is a big mistake ends up saving your life 20 years later.
Yes. The people that try to, shoot down our relationship, shoot down, how we came, even our marriage, being married so young, and even everyone that came against that, they look at it now and go, this was God. Look what God
Totally.
did. It was all God. God had it all planned out. He worked it all together for the good, right? And it was a miracle. It was a total miracle, and it happened the way that God wanted it to happen. And I think that's a lesson that people need to really understand, is that God's way of doing things is so much different than ours. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts higher than our thoughts. And so when we can really trust him and just say, God, it's going to work out the way you want it to. It may be uncomfortable in the moment. I may not completely understand it, but even in this stage of my life, David, I've stopped asking God why. I just say, now I ask God what? Like, what do you want me to do, God? Like, I don't need to know why. I really don't. But tell me what to do. Like, how do you want me to navigate through this? Give me the wisdom how to navigate through this. I can care less why now, because you're in ultimate control of my life. And so that whole situation, and I'm still dealing with it. I still deal with, some of the side effects of the medication, fatigue at times, because I have only one kidney, right? And so I still feel the fatigue, the different side effects. It's still an issue, but I've changed my perception and perspective over it. Now I look at it as kind of like Paul said. Now I delight in the struggle, man. At first it was like, God, take it away, and God's like, nah, my grace is sufficient. Now I delight in weakness. I delight in struggle. I look at it like, hey, it's helping me. It's keeping me on the right track, so changed my life, man.
And I'm so glad you didn't do the George Lopez thing, get the kidney and then you leave your wife, you're still together, man. You still love each other. You've created a great home and family and everything.
Yeah.
Man. I mean, that would have been totally cold-blooded.
George Lopez. Yeah, he did do that, huh?
Yeah, he did that,
Oh,
man.
man.
cold-blooded. He took his wife's kidney and bounced.
He bounced,
Like,
man.
Give me that thing back.
Yeah. I think there's somewhere an agreement I signed. Like, if I leave, I have to give the kidney back. That's not going to work, man. It's not going to work for me, man. So.
Man, that's an awesome story, man. Going back to the wife thing, man. How do you navigate having a great marriage with church and everything, man? How do you make time for that, man?
Yeah.
How do you really? I mean, I guess her giving you a kidney makes all the difference, right?
It helped a little bit.
I'm sure she's like, yeah, remember?
Yeah. Exactly, man.
All the time, right?
Yeah.
But how do you navigate that, man?
Let me say it like this. I think that when it comes to marriage, it's like anything else, right? Whatever you put into, you get out. Like, no matter what it is, whatever you invest, the scripture talks about sowing and reaping, right? Whatever you sow, you reap. Wherever you invest time, energy, resources, you get that back in return. And so when it comes to marriage, you have to make those big deposits, man. You got to make those big investments, whether it's, like we go every year to a marriage retreat. We do with our church. Every year we're at a marriage retreat, family vacations. We do time out with just date nights or lunch dates, or you always have to make that extra effort, because the way and especially this culture today, there's so many pressing issues that are drawing you for your attention and for your focus. You have to be deliberate on making that time for your spouse. Now, again, we've been together for a long time, man. Married 32 years. Grew up together. So, we've had to, here's what can happen when you marry that long. You just kind of take it for granted, right? So you're like, we've known each other since we were 13 and 14. She's good, I'm good. Let's just kind of go on. But I've seen also, like, one of the things that I seen when we went through that whole merger process, it took a toll on our marriage. When we came out of that, we had a little bit of friction for a time. There was some frustration and hurt because she went through what I went through. And guys need to understand this, that, okay, you're going to take a leadership role in ministry, or you're going to start a business, or you're going to start something new. Remember, your wife's taking those hits with you. It's not just you. It may just be you at the front or the face of it, but your wife's taking all the blows with you. Right. And so, when we did that merger, I was kind of the front of it, but the hits I took, she took them with me. And so she felt that. And so when we came out of it, there was a window, man, where we were just having a really difficult time communicating, talking through things. It seemed like everything was heated. There was a lot of frustration. So it took time for that to kind of wind down a little bit. And then the key thing, though, David, which I found in every marriage, it's important, is communication, man. You got to have an open line of communication. You got to be able to talk to each other. You got to be able to express your feelings and what you're going through with one another, because that line of communication, it keeps trust, and so that has been, if I can say anything that's kept us, has been that open line of communication, talking and sharing and being open and honest with each other.
So good, man. So good. I love it, man. I appreciate you coming out.
Oh, man, a great time, man. I love this.
Look at, hour and 40 minutes.
That's great. Is that good, or
that's good?
Is that good?
Yeah.
What's the norm? What's the norm for?
Hour, sometimes 2 hours. It
Okay.
just depends, man.
Okay.
But the flow was just good. I can tell you're a preacher, man, because it just flowed just like him. It was just like,
the thing about preachers, man, we always have something to say. So if you ever give a preacher the mic, man, you got to give him a time frame.
yeah, but there's some preachers that just don't stop, man. They just keep going and going.
I know. And that's one of the things I have to be mindful of too, because I could do that. I just got to be careful that I want to be honorable of, because this, I think what you're doing here, Dave, is awesome, man. It really is.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
And it's reaching into people's lives that, because you're touching so many genres, so many different lifestyles. And I think that's awesome, man.
I appreciate you all these years, man. You're a consistent guy, and I more than anything, I appreciate consistency. I mean, yeah, you can be consistently bad,
right? Yeah, you can do that too.
But I think you're consistently good, man. Your attitude has always been great, and I think I love that about you. I love that about men that are consistent, because it's in serving the Lord, consistent in attitude, in their family, in their marriage. I just love that, man. So
thank you, man.
I appreciate that. Consistency in your loyalty to the Raiders.
Come on, man. That ain't ever going away.
You know what I mean?
I bleed, bro. Silver and black, man. It's just that's not going anywhere.
One
man.
day, bro. God's gonna. I think we need to call Benny Hinn and ask him if he could just pray over the Raiders. Just maybe if Benny goes with his coat, right? I know I'm making a joke with this, but we need something.
I know we need a lot of help, man.
We need a miracle.
I was looking at the schedule, man. We have no primetime games this year. None.
Yeah.
Isn't that terrible, man?
Yeah, we
no primetime games, man. It's just like not even. I take it back. I think we have one like at the end of the year against the Chiefs. I think it was like a Sunday night game or something. But
I told Pastor Adam we play the Browns this year. You know what I mean? He's a big Browns fan, so.
But it used to be an easy win. Not anymore, man. The Browns are pretty good, man.
I know. We have a tough schedule, like always.
Yeah. Every year we have a tough schedule.
They hate the NFL hates the Raiders.
They do hate the Raiders, man.
I don't care what anybody says, man. We're not a conspiracy theorists.
No,
it's the truth.
It's the truth, man.
The truth. Hey, man, we do one more thing before you leave right here, man.
All right.
We do what me and Cam call the Furious Five. We ask you 5 furious questions.
Okay.
And we have you answer them.
All right. Let's do it.
You ready for this one?
Let's do it.
First question for Pastor Mando Luna on the Street Gospel Furious 5. Question number 1. Who is your favorite Raider of all time?
Oh, man, great question. I'm going to roll with, even in the short time, well, I take it back, Tim Brown. Timmy Brown, man.
Yeah,
love Tim
Brown. I got his jersey.
Humble guy, authentic, fast, and just awesome.
Mine, besides Bo, but he had a short time, right?
Yeah.
Charles Woodson.
Oh, yeah, I love Charles, man. Charles was solid, man.
Charles Woodson just embodies the Raiders.
And that was a fumble, too, man. It was a fumble, man. I still haven't got over that loss, man.
Brady admits it.
He did. It's a fumble.
I hated it because our team was better than the next year when we went to the Super Bowl. That year, we were better.
Right.
I felt that there was no stopping us.
We would have beat the Rams.
Easily.
We would have beat the Rams.
It would have been over.
It would have been over, man.
I would have been so happy to beat the Rams.
And what sucks about it is it was the tuck rule, right? So we get it. It's the rule. But the reality, it was a fumble.
It was a fumble.
It was a fumble, man.
Charles Woodson, man.
He was awesome.
One of my favorites all time.
He was awesome.
Question number 2 on the Street Gospel Furious 5. If you weren't a pastor and you could pick any, I don't want to call it occupation or career, but anything you were doing, what would it be?
Actor.
An actor.
I love.
Really?
Yeah, I've been fascinated with that since I was a kid. I've been in movies. Some of you guys don't know this, but I was in.
Wait, what?
I've been in some movies. I've been back in the day. There was this TV show called Hunter, and it was kind of like the SVU of today.
Okay.
Law and Order SVU.
Yeah.
And it was back in.
Hunter with Fred. What's the name for the Rams? That Hunter?
No. It was called.
Okay.
It was called.
Fred Dreyer.
Yeah. And so I played a gang member in those TV shows, and I won't tell you what episode was on because I want nobody to watch it.
Watch it, man.
And so I've been in that. I was in a movie with Noel G. I played a police officer, and so I've done some acting. I know a lot of actors in Hollywood, believers. And I loved it. I was always fascinated with it. So I would be an actor today.
Oh man, I want to see your acting chops.
I'll send you some pics, man.
You gotta check that out, man. All right. If you had one wish for the church body today, what would it be?
United. Yeah, man. That's we just did a baptism in California. I don't know if you've seen it. I know Mark Franzis does the one in OC, and we got together with other churches in the South Bay area. Myself and Eddie and Israel and a few other guys in the community there. We did it together and we went out there. It was awesome, man. It was just an incredible experience. I think the unity of the church, Jesus said this, he's in John, I think it's John 15, he says, he prayed, he said, Father, I pray that they be one, like we're one, like they would work together. They would be one as me and you are one. And so if there's anything, it would be the unity of the church, man.
Is it the unity because of the different denominations?
Maybe that. I think that's some of the issue, but I think the other issue is going back to what we talked about in the beginning. I think there's a little bit of competitiveness in the culture, man, where who's going to be in charge of it? Who's going to be leading it? Who's going to be the face of it? Who's going to be like, those are things that they don't talk about, but those are some of the reasons why they don't do it together.
Yeah. I don't think, I think we've been better about it.
You think so?
I think we've invited different people to come in.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And I mean, we had Russell Johnson.
Great.
Different people coming in. You guys connect with Israel. Different cultures, but I think together, like you said, it makes us better.
It does, man. It
makes
really
us
does.
better.
So that would be it.
I'm a big believer in that. I have a friend. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, Reformed pastor. I love the guy's a great guy.
Yeah.
Loves God, loves people, man. I'm just like. I'm blown away by this guy, and I'm like, and I tell people all the time, I don't think when you get to heaven, like Jesus is gonna say, "Were you a Pentecostal?"
Yeah, exactly,
You know,
exactly.
Were you Reformed? What?
Exactly.
He's not gonna ask us
Exactly.
that. So at the end of the day, let's just get together.
It's united, man. He loves unity. God loves unity, man.
I think God could use that. Question number 4.
Wait, by the way, how am I doing with the question? Are the answers good?
They're great.
Okay.
Yeah, they're great, right, Cam?
Is this a test? Is it a test, or is it like
No.
All right, am I getting rated on this? Or
No.
okay, all right.
Well, we'll see how many views you get.
Exactly, man. I'm gonna have to pay for the boost, man.
Keep that running.
Keep that running 24 hours a day, man.
Question number 4 on the Street Gospel Furious 5. Does Pastor Mando have any hobbies that nobody knows about that you just like to do? Other than preaching, church stuff, family stuff, anything you do.
Besides always being with the grandkids, man.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I'm always with the grandkids. I love with the grandkids. I'm always playing like sport. I love sports, man. So I play football with them, basketball with them. Honestly, my hobby right now is my grandkids. Nice. I love it, man. I mean, I just love being a grandpa.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love it. Last question for the Street Gospel Furious 5. Who is Pastor Mando's hero?
All right, that's an open question because there's so many people that have played a huge part of my life. Right, there's so many people that have impacted my life in so many ways.
Bro, don't give me the diplomatic answer, bro. Okay, you hurt some feelings right now, bro. Who is your hero?
My hero right now, honestly,
yes,
my hero right now is my pastor, Pastor Omar Lopez, and I say that for this reason. I've known him since I've been saved, right? And he has talk about consistency, talk about being the man that he's always been, just consistent, faithful, committed. You don't see a diminish in his love for people in the kingdom. Like that has been my role model, my spiritual father.
Nice.
He's just been the one that whenever I'm going through a tough time or have to make a judgment call or dealing with the situation, the first thought that comes to my head, of course, I talk to God, I get wisdom from the word, but I always think, okay, how would Pastor Omar deal with this situation? And it's been he's been such a great role model for me.
So great to have somebody like that in your life, man.
Absolutely.
Hey, you know what I forgot? We mentioned that there's people in your church that are fruit from this podcast.
Yes.
I mean, so on my part.
So tell me what happened.
So they reached out to me on a DM, right? And they just found the podcast. They liked what they heard, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. They weren't particularly believers.
Yeah.
They weren't going to church. I was just like, hey man, this is great. And I said, where do you guys live? And I connected her with my wife, and I asked her, where do you guys live? I said, hey, there's a great church. It's called Resonate. And I went to the page, got the address, sent it to them. They went to your church.
Yes.
Right. And then I was just like, cool. They would comment on some of the podcasts, and I was like, great. And then you're like, hey, they come to our church. Like, it's a great family. And I'm like, they're in there? And you're like, yeah. So
they're not only in there, they're involved, man. They're serving. As a matter of fact, they help oversee our Friends Ministry, which is an outreach to the community we do once a month. We go out, we prepare care packages. We feed the homeless in the community, take them blankets, food, things like that. And they're one of the leaders of that. This Sunday, as a matter of fact, they're having a lunch at their house after church for those that are serving in the ministry. So I got an invite. I'll be there at their house on Sunday after service, hanging out with them, fellowshipping with them. But they are an incredible couple, man. And when they first came in, and we were talking, they were saying, they heard the street gospel, and they were just so blown away by just what you've done here. And they were moved by it. And so them being with us now, they're doing so good, man. Their family's doing great. It's just, you see the fruit of it, And so just to let you know what you're doing, people are being touched by it, man.
That makes me feel so good. So somebody, I had a potential guest, he was giving me a hard time. He was like interviewing me to be on the show, right? And I was just like, hey, bro, do you want to be on or you don't want to be on? Everything's out there.
Yeah.
And he was giving me this whole thing. What do you is people getting saved through your podcast? What? I said, bro, there's fruit, man. Like we've had people come to this podcast, man, or listen to this podcast, and now they're in church. Now they're they've grown. Now they're being used, and their families there. I thought of Sabrina and her family, and I was just like, this is great, So Thank you, man. That was awesome, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
man.
that blesses me just that they're being used, and God just touched their family, and the podcast made some sort of difference.
It's making a huge difference, man. And I appreciate you having me on here. I've always seen the street gospel, and I'm going, man, I wonder if he ever's going to ask me to come on the show, man. And then you call me, and I'm like, this is a God timing thing, because I just believe that. And I prayed this before I got here, that the testimonies or the stories we share, that somebody would hear it that needs to hear it, man. Just to be encouraged, edified, redirected. Maybe somebody's on that far end going, I'm ready to give up, quit, that they wouldn't give up. There's always more room, man. Keep going. Keep going. Don't quit.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you, man, for coming out.
Miles, brother. Thank you, man.
Where can they find the church? Online? What city?
Resonate Church LA. We're in the city of Torrance. You can go to our website, www.resonatela.com, or you can follow us on our social media platforms at Resonate Church LA. And our service times are on Sunday at 10:30. We have midweek small groups throughout the week. But we'd love to see you.
Yeah. Hey, Pastor Mando, what's your Instagram?
At Pastor Mando.
Don't send him all kinds of crazy stuff. Everybody.
At Pastor, is this at Pastor Mando? Yeah, just at Pastor Mando.
Resonate Church, check him out. You already know what he's about, so you don't got to go check out the church. You know what he's about. He just told you everything, man. You know the story of the church. Go visit the church, man. We appreciate you coming out, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate
Thank you, man. That'll wrap up this episode of the Street Gospel Podcast with Pastor Mando Luna. We love you guys out there. We appreciate you guys out there. Make sure to tune in. Send it to somebody, man. If this story inspired you, send it to somebody. We love you. We out.